Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It's great to see so many people joining us to discuss an important subject. I'll be moderating today's webinar, so please ask any questions through the chat box. They'll be collected, and today's presenters will answer as many as possible at the end of the Q&A session. For anyone who can't stay for the entire webinar, it's being recorded and a copy will be made available on the IChemE YouTube channel. So without further delay, I'll hand over to the authors of the report to introduce themselves and their work.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Brian Smith and my co-presenter is Wendy Wilson. Wendy is one of our new members of the IChemE Board of Trustees and is also the diversity champion on the board. I am head of the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group that is currently a part of the London and Southeast Members Group. The aim of the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group is to raise awareness and understanding of equality, diversity, and inclusion issues. The group's work is driven by the interest of members and a desire to better understand barriers to participating in chemical engineering across the UK. Before we begin, we'd like to say a few thank yous for all the support we received in putting this report together. We would like to thank Alana Collis for her massive contribution to the report, David Walker for making this webinar happen, and the rest of the team that formatted the report for us. We'd also like to say a major thank you to all of those that participated in the survey. Here's just a breakdown of the report and the topics we'll be touching on today. I'd like to point out that this is just an overview of the findings, and the full report goes into much more detail on each of these topics. So a bit of history. In 2016, we released a survey in the UK to look at the effect of social background on university attendance, qualification, and entry into the workplace for chemical engineers. We received over 1,700 responses, which equates to roughly 9% of the UK membership. We were able to determine some useful conclusions from the data, but we could not find any compelling conclusion that could be drawn regarding social mobility. So in late 2017, we decided to release a new survey. The aim of this was to understand if a career in chemical engineering enabled upward social mobility. It excluded undergraduates because it was designed to ask about the pursuit of chemical engineering as a career, although it did also look at the effect of social background on university attendance, qualification, and the entry into the workplace for chemical engineers in order to reconfirm the validity of the findings. It looked at a wide variety of social mobility markers, and as a result, it can be concluded that chemical engineering is a vehicle for upward social mobility.
Like that. Yeah. As Brian mentioned, we had over 1,200 responses to the survey. All of the survey questions gave respondents the opportunity to answer prefer not to say. So for the demographic analysis on the next slide, those responses have been removed from the totals. Age was divided into 5-year increments, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, up to 60 to 64, with 2 additional age brackets for the under 25 and the over 65. The analysis showed that we had an even cross-section of respondents from each age bracket, which aligns reasonably well with the IChemE member database. There were 2 exceptions. There was a slight overrepresentation of those over 65, a 16% response rate versus 12% in the UK membership, and a slight underrepresentation of those under 30. The lower engagement level for the under 30s has been seen in a number of IChemE surveys, as well as in the voting during the Congress elections. This is a cause for concern and is something the Institute is trying to understand and address. Of the 1,266 respondents, 99% identified as male or female. A total of 9 people selected other or prefer not to say. Of those that identified as male or female, 78% were male and 22% were female. Similar to the age spread, this aligns fairly well with the IChemE's non-undergraduate UK membership, which stands at 81% male and 19% female. The data also reflected the trend that female participation in the profession has gradually increased over the last several decades. For those respondents under 25, 28% were female. When we analysed the ethnicity of the respondents, 91% identified as being white. 28 respondents did not wish to identify their ethnicity. Analysis of the non-white respondents showed that the under 34 age categories contain the highest percentage of minority ethnic groups. The majority of these identify as being from Asian or Asian British background. The 2011 census data indicates that 87% of the UK population describe themselves as belonging to the white ethnic group, or put another way, 13% of the UK population belong to an ethnic minority group. Looking at the numbers, it would appear that the ethnic minority groups are underrepresented in chemical engineering. However, data from the Engineering UK states that 8% of workers in engineering sector are from an ethnic minority group. In comparison, 9% of the survey respondents identified themselves as from a black or ethnic minority group. Unfortunately, though, these numbers were too low to carry out any meaningful analysis of the interrelationship between social class and ethnicity. The region where you live can influence both access to chemical engineering and career opportunities. This is visible throughout education in terms of regional deprivation and access to work experience and awareness of the profession. To help understand the impact of this, respondents were asked where they grew up as well as where they currently reside. Data from the IChemE database shows that a high percentage of members are clustered around the Northwest, Scotland, London or the Southeast, and this was also reflected in the survey. 66% of the survey respondents are located in these areas. Clearly, this is influenced by the location of traditional manufacturing and consultancy hubs in the UK. Understanding the social background of respondents during childhood was key to carrying out a lot of the analysis in the report. In terms of the survey, questions were asked about social class, parental attendance at university, and receipt of means-tested benefits. For the survey, we divided social class into 4 distinct areas: working class, lower middle class, upper middle class, and upper class. No definitions were given for these, and as a result, the respondents had to self-identify their social class during childhood. Interestingly, only 3 respondents identified themselves as coming from the upper class, and these had to be omitted from most of the analysis. Overall, 74% of respondents came from the working class or the lower middle class. The working class percentage was 32%, and the lower middle class was 42%. During the analysis, we compared the respondents' class against the region where they grew up. The results showed that 15% came from the Northwest, 12% from Scotland, and 15% from the Southeast. These 3 regions represent the main regions where those that identified as working class originated from, in addition to London. 13% of the upper middle class respondents grew up outside of the UK. Analysis of social background during childhood against the age category shows there has been no notable change in the proportion of chemical engineers coming from a working class background. Another measure of background social position is whether respondents had received any means-tested benefit, such as free school meals, income support, or university grants. The survey did not distinguish between benefits received during school years and university. The graph on this slide shows the results from the survey question, with the green bars representing yes to receipt of means-tested benefit and the purple bars being no. There is a clear crossover point on the graph between the 40 to 44 and the 45 to 49 age groups. For the age groups over 45, over 55% of the respondents received some forms of mean-tested benefit. In contrast, for the age groups under 45 years old, 41% or less received means-tested benefits. Of those respondents that received these benefits, 47% defined themselves as coming from a working class background and 40% from a lower middle class background. These figures also differ slightly from the results of the significantly from the results of the 2016 survey, where only 17% of the total respondents versus 50% in the survey stated they received any form of benefit. We believe this difference is due to better definition of means testing in the 2017 survey. There are some regional variations for receipt of benefits during childhood. The highest proportion of those receiving benefits are in the West Midlands at 68%, followed by Yorkshire and Humber at 60%. This slide gives a graphical overview of the survey results for parental education for each of the different age groups. This mirrors the data that we obtained from the 2016 survey. As can be seen from the graph, there is a significant difference between the younger and older generations. There is a clear trend that in the older age groups, parents were less likely to undertake higher education, as shown by the lime green bars. Over 82% of the respondents in the over 65 age group had neither parent attend university. In comparison, only 41% of the under 25 age group had neither parent attend university. Conversely, there is an increase in the number of people where both parents attended university, as depicted by the blue bars. Only 5% in the over 65 age group compared to 38% in the under 25 age group. Where one parent attended university, it is most likely to be the father. An average of 5% of the respondents across all age groups had only a mother attend university, compared to an average of 15% for only a father. Where parental education is compared against the social class during childhood, it is not surprising that over 91% of the respondents who self-selected as working class did not have a parent who attended university. This is compared to 61% in the lower middle class and 29% in the upper middle class. The regions where respondents grew up show little correlation with the nature of parental education. In all regions, 50% or more respondents had neither parent attending university. Respondents who grew up outside of the UK and in the Southwest were most likely to have both parents attend university. The next section of the presentation looks at university education and what influence social background has on this. Nowadays, chemical engineering normally starts with a university education. Of the 1,226 respondents who answered the question, 1,209 attended university, which equates to 98.6%. All respondents under the age of 40 attended university. Of those aged between 40 and 65, only 1% did not attend university. Of the people who did not attend university, 71% of these were aged over 65. This is indicative of the changes in the education system. Our analysis shows that there was no correlation between social class during childhood and the type of university attended, whether it was a Russell Group, former Polytechnic, or new university. If we analyse the university using the QS rankings of the top 200 chemical engineering departments and split them into tiers per the graph on the slide, there is a relatively small difference between the working class or lower middle class backgrounds attending a top-ranked university in comparison to the upper middle class respondents, with the exception of those that attended a top-tier university. Of the respondents who identified as working class, 10.6% attended a top-ranked university. This compares to 16.5% and 24% of the lower middle class and the upper middle class respondents, respectively. The other group on the y-axis refers to those universities not ranked in the top 200, and the results show that more working class respondents attended a non-ranked university compared to the lower and upper middle class respondents. There is little evidence of any relationship between the region where the respondents grew up and the region they attended university. The exception to this was Scotland. In this case, almost 87% of those that grew up in Scotland attended a Scottish university. This is not unsurprising, given that there are no tuition fees for Scottish students. This next slide plots the highest qualification obtained by a respondent prior to starting work. 4 options were given in the survey: diploma or non-graduate, bachelor degree, master's degree, or doctorate. These results mirror the findings from the 2016 survey. It can be seen from the graph that there is a clear crossover point between the 35 to 39 and the 40 to 44 age groups. Those respondents above the age of 40 are more likely to obtain a bachelor's degree prior to employment, whereas those below the age of 40 typically have a master's. A number of factors might be driving this trend. From 1985 onwards, more universities offered master's level courses, and this development prompted many major employees of chemical engineers to specify a master's level qualification for entrance to their graduate programs. In addition, the International Accreditation Agreement for Professional Engineering Academic Degrees, known as the Washington Accord, provides a widely recognized benchmark for professional registration, which a master's degree fulfills. The changes in the education system make it difficult to determine whether class during childhood has any impact on the level of qualifications obtained prior to employment. The data indicates that 51% of working class respondents obtained a bachelor's degree, while 35% gained a master's. This compares to 43% and 46% of upper middle class respondents gaining a bachelor's and a master's degree respectively. There is no noticeable difference in the accessibility of a doctor's qualification.
We now move on to questions regarding career progression. First, we asked respondents if they obtained work experience before graduating university, and we defined work experience as either a summer placement, an internship, or a year in industry placement. Our results show that over 3/4 of respondents obtained some form of work experience relevant to chemical engineering before graduating. And of those, 87% had gained employment within 6 months. In comparison, only 73% that did not gain work experience entered employment within 6 months, 14 percentage points lower. This confirms the view that gaining work experience during university significantly helps with getting a job afterwards. In addition to this, the evidence suggests that work experience does not disproportionately is more or less acceptable depending on social class. This is backed up by the hypothesis that was also tested in the first survey that suggests that university basically acts as a way to level the playing field for people from different societal backgrounds. The survey provided respondents an opportunity to share comments about how social background has held them back. There's a significant number of responses that share the view that a poor social background at school age can impact school grades and access to higher ranking universities. It was also recognized by chemical engineers that work experience and graduate employment can be affected by university because some employers have preferred universities and they targeted recruitment and potentially strong alumni links. This could have impact on the opportunity for work experience, although we didn't explore it in this survey. There are some societal limitations still present. Chemical engineering as a whole is still providing opportunities for people from all social backgrounds. In terms of charter, on the topic of chartership, in total, 69% of our respondents have come from charter engineers, with a further 22% working towards chartership. As expected, those under the age of 30 are less likely to be chartered, with 79% of respondents in this age group working towards it. Of all respondents, 76% of those who received mean tested benefits were chartered, compared to only 65% of those who did not. We found no notable difference in the time it took to get chartered after starting relevant employment across different societal classes. Overall, most people take about 5 to 7 years, but it's important to recognize that chartered engineering status is based on competency and not on age. This is encouraging to see that those under 30 continue to see value in getting chartership. We also asked respondents if they were satisfied with their career progression to date. We found there was little difference in this satisfaction across social class during childhood, with those not satisfied with the career progression being 21%, 18%, and 15% for working class, lower middle class, and upper middle class, respectively. In terms of career progression, of the respondents that answered, 17% of men and 23% of women were not satisfied with their career progression to date. There was little difference in satisfaction across social class during childhood, and similarly, analysis against receipt of benefits in childhood did not show any difference in satisfaction with career progression. We also asked respondents if they believe their social class has changed due to their career. And over 76% of those who identified as having a working class childhood thought their social class has changed as a result of their career. This is compared to 43% of lower middle class and only 8% of upper middle class respondents. This really goes to the crux of the survey and supports the idea that chemical engineering is a profession where social mobility is possible. In terms of overall, 45% their social class has changed due to the career, but 46% has said it has not led to a change, with the remaining declaring they weren't sure. There is no notable difference between male and female responses, but unsurprisingly, those earlier in the career, i.e. under 30, were less likely to think their career had led to a change in class. We went further and asked if they felt their social class had ever held them back during different periods of their life. The general view held is that all classes believe social setting, as shown by this table above. The survey has also queried how this is changing, i.e. whether social mobility in the profession is improving or worsening. Notably, 34% of those from a working class background believe it's becoming harder for socially disadvantaged people to succeed, compared to 11% from an upper middle class background. This is something we really need to be wary of. While we are currently seen as a profession for social mobility, this is not a guarantee for the future. We asked respondents to provide examples of how they feel their background was impacted, and some of the main reasons included inadequate schooling or a poor curriculum, a lack of STEM subjects in the school, as well as the quality of the teachers. Regional accent was mentioned a significant number of times. One of the respondents stated, those with strong regional accents are not taken seriously and are discriminated against. Some find a solution to this to work outside the UK. We also had respondents mention ethnic origin and mainly a lack of self-confidence and uncomfortable or inability to mix with social classes. Another respondent said, individuals with better education have greater self-confidence and stronger communication skills. This supports better career progression.
As mentioned earlier, region can influence access to chemical engineering and career opportunities. Industries that employ chemical engineers are not evenly spaced across the UK, and therefore many people move to study at university and then again for jobs. This section looks at the relocation of engineers as well as some of the blockers to relocation. Overall, 60% of respondents believe that where you live influences your career opportunities. The largest number of respondents grew up in the Northwest, Scotland, and the Southeast, which are all areas of significant industry. 62% of the survey respondents indicated that they currently reside in a region that is different to where they grew up. Of the 31% who had not moved, 22% remain in Scotland, 21% in the Southeast, and 18% in the Northwest. This is not surprising, as these areas have a high concentration of industry. Of the respondents that stayed in the region where they grew up, 63% believe that where they live does influence their career opportunities. This is compared to 62% of the respondents have moved, so no significant difference. Of those that stayed in the same region, 71% indicate that they are happy with their career to date, and 38% believe their social class has changed. In comparison, those that have moved are happier with their career progression, a 6% increase to 77%, and are more likely to believe that their social class has changed, a 4% increase to 42%. The results indicate that 63% of respondents were willing to relocate for their career, either within the UK or abroad. Of the 37% that are not willing to relocate for a job or their career, the responses received were categorized, and the top 3 reasons were identified as family, no desire to move, and retirement. As can be seen from the table, there was no significant difference in willingness to move based on social class during childhood. although men were slightly more willing to relocate for their career than women. When relocation was considered not an option, women were significantly more likely to base their decision on family, 74%, compared to men, 41%. Not unsurprisingly, family was also cited as the main reason for not considering relocation in those aged between 30 and 55. The uneven distribution of industry across the UK was identified as the main influence on career opportunities. This included the fact that there are more employment opportunities in the southeast and London, and that clusters outside of London are more limited in terms of industry sector and career progression. Examples identified were the oil and gas hotspot in Aberdeen and the process industries clustered in the northwest and northeast. In some regions where there is less industry, it clearly correlates that there are fewer opportunities. This was identified not just in terms of access to career opportunities, but it also impacts awareness of the career options of young people. The latter is a consequence of less exposure to chemical engineering and the career opportunities it presents. So to the conclusions. One of the main reasons I volunteered to get involved with this work was because I came from a working class background, and through my education and career, I have been fortunate to experience upward social mobility. Consequently, I was extremely happy to see that through the analysis of the survey data, that chemical engineering is seen by its members as a profession where social mobility is possible. This is an important conclusion given that 74% of respondents identify themselves as coming from a working class or lower middle class background. And although this is self-reporting, it is supported through the additional questions such as parental education and means testing. While there is a slight reduction in the number of respondents coming from working or lower middle class amongst the younger generation, there are still 67% in the under 30 age category. A total of 42% of respondents, the majority being from working or lower middle class, indicated that they felt their social class had changed as a result of their career in chemical engineering. Of those coming from a working class background, 76% believe their social class had changed as a result of their career. That said, 34% of those from a working class background felt it was becoming harder for people from a socially disadvantaged background to succeed in the profession. Based on this, we cannot afford to be complacent and need to continue to look at ways that the profession can improve accessibility to chemical engineering. Almost 50% of the respondents received some type of means-tested benefit during their childhood. Almost 90% of these were from a working class or lower middle class background. It would appear that coming from a more disadvantaged background increases the desire to succeed, as the survey results show that these individuals are more likely to become chartered and earn salaries at the upper end of the scale. Receipt of means-tested benefit and social background do not appear to influence whether a respondent was able to obtain work experience while at university. This supports a key conclusion in the 2016 survey that once at university, there is more equality of opportunity or more of a level playing field. 72% of those who obtained work experience before graduation were able to obtain work immediately. Again, this supports a key conclusion from the 2016 survey. While these are the headline conclusions, it must also be noted that there are exceptions where respondents from all different social classes have hit obstacles during their career and education. Certainly in my last role as a general manager, I have witnessed and or heard of similar issues, which have held back individuals. And there is a lot that companies as well as the education system need to do to address some of these biases and inequalities.
So now is the time we ask ourselves what we as chemical engineers can do. While we are seen as a profession for social mobility, we need to ensure that we continue to be. The first opportunity we see is to continue to promote awareness, understanding, and access to the profession in regions where we aren't really located. As Wendy said, we're clustered around certain areas in the UK. So we need to ensure that we're still attracting the best talent from other areas and ensure that they see chemical engineering as a profession that they can enter. We also need to promote the awareness of unconscious bias in the workplace, as well as increase the number of women and other minority groups in the profession. For immediate next steps, we plan to share these findings with other institutions and industry-wide. These results basically set a benchmark for companies at which to measure themselves against. This also applies to other institutions. If we can find other common issues across all right. Yeah. Sorry, there may have been some issues there, so I'm just going to restart a bit. So in terms of next steps, our next step is to share these findings with other institutions and industry-wide. Like I said, these results can set a benchmark for companies at which to measure themselves against. This also applies to other institutions. If we can find common issues across the fellow disciplines, we can work together to solve them and have a greater impact on society. We also are going to continually monitor our social mobility progress as an institution. This may take several forms that we're still working through, but it is something we plan to do. With that, Wendy and I would like to thank you all for listening and open the floor to any questions you might have.
Okay, we'll just give you a couple of minutes to submit your questions while we prepare some answers, the ones that we've had in. Okay, our first question is, you noted that some people think it's becoming harder for people from working class background to succeed in chemical engineering. Do you think that's the case? And if so, what can we do about it?
Yeah, I will. I think there's a lot of things we can do as an industry, and part of that is just working with different projects, different initiatives. One of the things I know a couple of companies do is ensure that they provide internships and things from areas that are specifically lower income. We found within our own company that when we've done that, we've seen no difference in performance or a path to chemical engineering that they previously wouldn't have seen. So I think the support of initiatives like that are really helpful.
On that, I think there's things in the education system. I think people from the working class are often in areas where schooling is not as good as perhaps it could be, and there's often lack of availability of the 3 science subjects. Sometimes it's just clustered together as science, and I think there's a lot more work that can be done with the schools and with the education system to ensure that through the GCSEs and the A levels that individuals are set up for success to do a career in engineering. And I think, if you come from an upper middle class background, you've probably got access to better schools, and that's an area where we definitely need to make the playing field, if you like, a bit more level to give everyone equal opportunities with their schooling.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that getting into university, it seems to act as a leveler, but we also need to make sure that people are getting into the universities and ensuring that they're able to make it into that step to begin with.
Okay, thank you very much. So another question come in. If I'm interested in becoming part of this group to help drive diversity initiatives, who do I speak to? So you can email diversity@icheme.org. You can contact us on Twitter at IChemE would you like to talk more about the group?
Yes, yeah, we currently do 2 to 3 special events. These are member led. So at the end of each year, we decide, what do our members really are passionate about? And so we've done events on unconscious bias. Every year we help out with the International Women in Engineering Day. In London, we're part of a group that works with all the other institutions so we work with the IMECs, the IChemE, the ICE, a bunch of others where we work together and just run a number of events across London for the International Women in Engineering Day on the 23rd of June. We also run a number of events, but it all depends on basically if somebody gets involved and tells us this is something I'm passionate about, this is something I really want to get involved with. It's actually kind of where this started from. We had a couple members come up to us and say we're really passionate about social mobility. So we've decided, all right, let's see what we can do as really take a look at it. So yes, please get in contact. And if you have any point of diversity that you're really interested in, let me know and we'll be glad to start setting up events for it.
It's certainly what I did. I saw the survey come out in 2016, decided I was really interested, and I got in contact with the person that sent out the survey, and they put me into contact with Brian, and the rest they say is history.
So our next question is, how do we increase IChemE's visibility in this arena, as there are a number of diversity events where other professional engineering institutions are present, but not so much IChemE? How do we find the people who to contact? So is that referring to the people at other institutions or us?
There we are. Can you hear me? Sorry, having technical issues on our side. Yeah, I mean, the main way in terms of working with other institutions, there's a lot of other institutions that are passionate about these, but they don't really have anything set up for this. There's a lot of external, not necessarily institutions, but external groups that focus on this, particularly women in engineering and other diversity and equal engineers, etc. But in terms of institutionally, there's not many of our counterparts, unfortunately. But as diversity groups and diversity events we try to invite them over and get people involved. But in terms of directly with other institutions, there's not many others similar, and hopefully it's something we can change.
Yes, and in terms of people getting in contact with the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group, I would say that the best way is through the email address diversity@icheme.org. I'll include all of these contact details with a follow-up email, which will include a copy of the report and a copy of these presentation slides. So the next question is the trend that younger people in the industry are more likely to have parents who attended university. Does this reflect the profession becoming more exclusive to people whose parents were not as educated, or is this a change in people's tendency to go to university over time?
Go. I think it's a bit of both. I don't think. I think more people are being encouraged to go to university now, and I think we've seen over the last 10 years certainly a real bow wave of people attending university as it's been, as apprenticeships and such like have diminished. More and more people have gone to university, but I think that might change again in the future, where the government is now looking to do more apprenticeship type programs. So we may have seen a peak of the number of people where parents go to university, and it may drop off. Don't know, but if you look at how the government is looking to educate STEM in many different ways, I think that might change. And I don't think parents necessarily have engineering degrees with the children that go to university to study engineering. I know quite a few of my colleagues whose children have gone and done something completely different. They haven't gone and done engineering at all.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I think it's something we, not just engineers, but just society in general need to be wary of is really the professionalization of all careers at this point. As we said, 98% of all chemical engineers have a degree, and now that we're focusing on getting masters more than even bachelors is something that we really need to watch out for, and make sure that we are not becoming exclusionary in terms of a profession. So it is something we need to watch out for. But to say there's one factor affecting it is that I don't know if we can say it's one thing or another. As Wendy said, I think a lot more people have gotten degrees, parents have gotten degrees, and more people are going to university in general. We just need to make sure that it's not becoming an exclusionary part of that.
I think it is going to be interesting to see how the government's initiative now on STEM is going to change, whether chemical engineering via apprenticeship may be a possibility in the future.
So, and the next question, Wendy, you mentioned you'd seen bias in your workplace. Can you talk about that and expand on that?
Yeah, I can't go into too many specifics, but you know, when I looked at some of the typed in responses to what people had seen, whether it was their regional accent, whether it was because they felt they were a person of color or they were, you know, an ethnic minority, you do see that there are still people in industry that have a negative bias towards those individuals. And I'm a firm believer that ability is not about your accent, not about the color of your skin or anything like that. It's about what you can actually deliver. And I always took people on how they did their work, not about their appearance or anything like that. And I think we just need to be much more open to people being different from ourselves. I think we do tend to stereotype people and want people to be in our own, like ourselves, if you like, and make us feel comfortable. And at the end of the day, that's not important. It's what those people deliver. And I try to give everyone the opportunity to succeed. Now, I have to temper that with, you do get some individuals that believe they're brilliant, and the reality is they're not. So, you know, a lot of the written comments that we get, you have to take a little bit with a pinch of salt. But when you see trends and they resonate with what you've seen in your actual work life, they can't be those kind of people. They have to be genuine as well. And I think companies are working on it, but it's still very much an upward an upward battle to actually get through all of those biases. And I think doing different webinars on unconscious bias and getting people to really understand that they do have them. They may say they haven't, but in reality they do. And I think the more that we can talk about it, the more that we can be exposed to it, that the more it helps us to overcome those biases.
So another comment, the person who said that working abroad is an escape from being judged on class identifiers like accent, do you think that's the case? And is that the same wherever you go?
I mean, I can only speak from my experience, but I do think there is an element to that. I am obviously not from the UK. I'm from the US, but working over here, in some ways, it gave me a clean slate to define who I am. People, I say I'm from a certain region in the US, and they may have their preconceptions, but they don't really. I have a clean slate to do what I want. I'm seen as just an American here mostly, and I think that's the case for Brits going abroad. They don't have to worry about being viewed in a certain light. They're seen more as a British person rather than from a certain class. So I do think there is some element to that. I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule, but yeah, I do think working abroad gives you some sort of amenity and some sort of freedom from it, from the background of social class, the idea of social class at home.
That's brilliant, thank you. So we've got time for just a few more questions. If the need for relocation affects carers unfairly, what can be done about that in such a clustered industry? Is remote working an option?
So I think the answer is yes and no. I think it very much depends on what job you're doing. I mean, clearly, if you're a chemical engineer working on a live plant, you need to be there. You need to be there on a day-to-day basis to troubleshoot and perform your job. I think there are other parts of chemical engineering jobs that can be done virtually. I mean, especially if you're in a design house or something like that, if you look at it, designs are done around the world. That's effectively virtual working. Yes, people are in offices, but they're virtually working UK, India, US, whatever. So I think you have to pick what you want to do carefully if you want to do virtual work, but certainly possible. And I think a lot of companies are understanding that. I would put a slight caution on that. I think working virtually can isolate you. I think you don't have the mix with people. You don't get problems solved as quickly because you're not there talking to people. But then I'm old, and people can do it on communicator and messenger and stuff now. That I always prefer talking to people face to face. I think you also have to accept that different generations do things differently as well. But there's a balance, right, between what you want out of your job and what you can do virtually.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've been in a number of roles, and some of them have been on the front line where I need to be able to fix a piece of equipment right then and there. And then I've been in other positions where I could be sat anywhere, and it didn't really affect where I did it. So I do think it really depends on the role that you're taking on. But no, yeah, I see it as one tool in the solution.
We have time for one more question before we hand over to wrap up the event. when you were reading through the responses people gave for feeling held back, what ones really stood out to you? What were very common in the written responses people gave to you?
So I think there were a lot about education. So inadequate schooling, poor curriculum, lack of STEM subjects, quality of teachers. I think there was a high proportion of people that in some shape or form articulated something there. I found it very disappointing. I don't know if that's the right word, that, you know, there were some schools that didn't offer physics, chemistry and biology as GCSEs. They only offered science. And that to me makes it so much harder then if you want to go into engineering, because you do need to do at least chemistry and physics and maths at a higher level. There were, and then there were other things around unaware of the opportunities. So whether it's your parents don't know anything about engineering, or whether the school itself and the careers advisors in the schools don't know anything. You know, you'd think, you'd hope that your physics teacher, your chemistry teacher would be telling you about engineering. You know, your careers advisors would know about a whole range of different opportunities that were available to you. And again, that was seen as very much lacking. And I mean, I can reflect back at my own school days. I wanted to be a doctor for I don't know how long, but I also kind of wanted to work in the oil industry. Two didn't really go together, but that's where my mind was. And purely by chance, I was offered the opportunity to go on a woman in engineering 5 days at Cardiff University. And I suddenly found out about engineering. And suddenly engineering and the oil industry went together for me. And the rest, they say, is history. But it is around being given those opportunities and actually being able to see what's out there and understand what's out there as well. Because even, you know, if you are told about it, until you actually see what engineering is about and all the different types of engineering, you may walk into something that you don't want to do.
Yeah, and some of the other responses included things like a lack of self-confidence. There was a lot of talk of almost like the unwritten rules that seemed to the people from upper middle class and upper class backgrounds seemed to know that just how to hold themselves and how to assert themselves in the workplace and in education, that people from lower middle class backgrounds and working class backgrounds felt they didn't know the way. There was a lot of comments saying that there's the lack of self confidence, the lack of ability to assert themselves, and yeah, that struck out to me as something that came back. Just a lot of the unwritten rules, or so, as they say.
That said, if you look at it from the upper middle class background, some of them felt that they had a hard time when they got into industry because they didn't fit.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked both ways.
Yeah. It goes back to some of that unconscious bias that we have. We tend to choose people that are similar to ours, that we can relate to easier. And so if you push yourself almost as a fish out of water, depending on the setting, you always feel like you stick out a bit more.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. So before I hand back to our speakers to close the event, just a quick reminder, you can find out more about all of these results in the full report, which is available on the diversity webpage on the IChemE website, which is in the Knowledge Hub under Policy. You can also contact us at diversity@icheme.org to find more information, and you can catch us on Twitter at @ichemediversity. So would you like to quickly wrap us up, and then we can finish a couple of minutes?
Yes, just once again, we want to thank you all for listening in, and thank you for completing the survey. I mean, it was a great feeling to see all the responses we got when we put these out there. quiet again. I got a bad microphone, I guess. But yeah, again, just thank you for responding to our survey. Like I said, you can't know when you put these out whether or not you're getting a response, but it was good to see that we got a number of responses and give us a good idea of who our members are and a better idea of how we can best serve them. So just thank you again from me.
Yeah, and likewise from me. It's great to see that chemical engineering does promote upward social mobility, but I think we all need to be very cognizant of the fact that it could slide away, and we do still have a lot of people coming from the low, the working class and the lower middle class, and hopefully this profession continues to allow them to better themselves and move up in society. And I would like to give my thanks as well to everyone who phoned in. We can't do these without you. And also I hope that anyone that listens to this separately, because it will be recorded, that, if you do get an interest in this subject, please get in touch. Volunteers are gratefully received.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Goodbye.